Look, I think a lot of Americans, I mean, I had a conference in my paying job the other day, um, and I made the reference to the term special military operation. And immediately somebody jumped in and said, well, I don't speak Putin, meaning that simply by using the term special military operation, I was somehow buying into a Russian lexicon and therefore supporting Russian propaganda. And I said, well, that's about the most ignorant thing I've ever heard anybody say because I'm not speaking Putin either. I'm speaking reality. This was a special military operation, the initial goals and objectives of which were to get Ukraine to the negotiating table, to bring a rapid conclusion to a problem between Ukraine and Russia. And it almost worked. On April 1st, Ukraine was supposed to sit down in Istanbul and sign a peace treaty with Russia, but NATO intervened. And that intervention is everything because prior to that, this was simply a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And that is not an existential threat to Russia. But when NATO intervenes and turns Ukraine into a proxy of NATO to achieve the strategic defeat of Russia, we have now created a potential existential crisis for Russia. And as Medvedev said, an existential crisis means we use nuclear weapons to defend ourselves. And that's the state we've been in since May, June of 2022. We have been facing the imminent possibility of a nuclear war because this war is between NATO and Russia. And that's what Lukashenko is saying. He's saying, even though if you're looking at things, it looks like everything's going okay for Russia right now, what happens if Poland intervenes in Western Ukraine? What happens if Latvia and Lithuania decide to embargo Kaliningrad, that Russian enclave on the Baltic Seas? These are acts of war that could get Russia engaged in military conflict with a NATO member. Article 5 then kicks in, and now it's a general war between Russia and NATO, not a de facto war, but a real war, and nuclear weapons will be used. So that's what Lukashenko is saying. He's saying, for all those people in Poland that are meeting with the Ukrainians, talking about erasing the border to create a confederation between Ukraine and Poland, thereby allowing Poland to bring troops in, that will be a nuclear conflict. For all those people in Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia who think you can embargo Kaliningrad to punish Russia, that will be a nuclear conflict. That the threat of nuclear war is very real. And remember, he's the president of Belarus, who has now been empowered by Russia. On July, Russia will be storing nuclear weapons on Belarus soil that are going to be turned over to Belarus Air Force and missile forces in case of a war. So Lukashenko is speaking as a potential nuclear leader. So everybody should listen to what he's saying. He's not threatening anybody. He's just stating a straight up fact that things can still go, as you said, sideways. And if they go sideways, nuclear weapons are very much on the table. So I say this not because I want to fearmonger or be seen as supporting Russian policy. I say this as an American who doesn't want to die. And I would hope that everybody listening to this understands that that's what we're talking about. This isn't a game. This is reality. And for Russia, it's life and death reality, just as if a Russian army was in Mexico threatening to empower insurgents in America to strip away Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Maybe even take Colorado and Utah while you're at it. Just carve away all of those former Spanish territories, former Mexican territories, and bring them in. We would view that as an existential threat, and we would use every weapon necessary to prevent that from happening, to include nuclear weapons. That's where Russia is right now, and they're not playing games.
Yeah. I bring this stuff up because I read this, but then I go to like CNN and MSNBC and ABC News. They're not talking about the warnings from Lukashenko. They're not talking about the warnings from Medvedev. And that's why I bring these up. And sometimes people are like, well, you're making this stuff up because I'm not seeing it in the mainstream media. But, trusting the mainstream media is typically not the best thing to do. So I appreciate your insight on that.
Did
Colonel,
you see Tucker Carlson's most recent interview after he left Fox?
Possibly. I've watched several things trying to understand, but tell me what it is, and then I'll tell you if I know what you're
Well, it was
saying.
just he was doing a podcast. It was a young kid. I think he referred to his age as
Oh,
28.
okay.
But the interesting thing, the only reason I bring it up is that he said one of the greatest insights is he said, is that the media is not here to tell you the truth. The media is here to shape things. They lie, they distort, and so the reason why I brought that up is to reinforce what you were saying. When you watch CNN, when you watch MSNBC, when you watch Fox News, when you watch anything, ABC, NBC, CBS, understand they're not there to tell you the truth. They are there to shape a perception. They are there to promulgate a a policy position that's not about the truth, but about what we want you to do. Um, and so it it's very likely when you look at something as controversial as Ukraine that you're not going to get the truth from mainstream media. And this is why it's important to dig deeper. And that's why I hope people are grateful for what you're doing, because you are providing them with analysis and information that they wouldn't be getting from mainstream media, but they should be getting from mainstream media.
Yeah. Okay. Now that you explain it, I did see that. I didn't personally watch Tucker Carlson on Fox News, but with him being fired, I've been digging into him a little
Yeah,
bit more, and yeah, he said that he was kind of embarrassed to be in his 50s and it hadn't dawned on him that he was part of the government mouthpiece, putting out narrative versus putting out truth. I thought that was pretty a sign of humility to recognize that. And some of that is, your sponsors dictate what you're able to talk about. We
absolutely.
saw that during COVID. We see that during wartime situations. Okay. Colonel Douglas McGregor has said that this war has moved from a special operation to a humanitarian crisis, and that the American people don't fully understand how awful this war is every day. The trenches, this is as bad as World War I and World War II. The Ukrainian people are being slaughtered, and we don't, we're mad that our tax money is going to them versus helping the homeless or whatever. But their reality is that they are being wiped out as a nation. What are your thoughts on him saying that this has now become a humanitarian crisis for Ukraine?
Well, I mean, again, I'll preface this by saying that Colonel McGregor is one of the few sane voices out there. And every time he speaks, there's that old commercial when I forget the name of the company, but when so and so speaks, everybody listens. When Colonel McGregor speaks, everybody should listen because he is very, very balanced. And I have to second to what he's saying. I mean, um, it is a humanitarian. We're watching the death of a nation, literally the death of a nation. But more than that, we're watching the the death of a people. I don't mean individuals. I mean the Ukrainian people. If the casualty figures are remotely correct, and I believe they are, over 300,000 Ukrainian men have died. Right? That's a genetic pool that is gone, removed. I don't want to get into too much, but understand that you know we all know where we came from, and it wasn't storks. Okay, and it requires a man and a woman in union to produce children. And the Ukrainians are losing their men; they're being slaughtered. Um, and again, I don't want to get into too much Darwinism here, but some of the best examples of Ukrainian men, the most healthy, most physically fit, you know, manly men, are dying. And so what's left is not that. What's left is something different, which is going to change the way Ukraine moves forward as a nation. This is wrong. This is just we and most Americans don't get it. They're being slaughtered. It's not a fair fight. No war is meant to be. Colin Powell famously said, "I don't believe in a fair fight. My job isn't to have a fair fight. My job is to kill you." Um, and that's what the Russians are doing right now. They have, over the course of the last several months, changed the entire dynamic of this war zone. Ukrainian air defense almost doesn't exist anymore. And by removing air defense on the front line, the Russian Air Force is now freer to attack targets using weapons they previously couldn't do. Ukrainian weapons that were given to them by the United States designed to equalize the battlefield no longer work because the Russians are very smart, very adaptive. They've jammed the GPS signals. And so the Ukrainians aren't able to do to the Russians what the Russians are doing to them in increasing numbers. And the Russians are gradually getting angry. And what I mean by that is their capacity to kill is becoming greater. Whereas during the Battle of Mariupol, the Russians did not habitually drop entire apartment buildings. They would actually send their troops in who would fight 4 by 4 to take the building, very bloody fighting. And then they'd give the people in the basement a chance to surrender. Now the Russians come forward, and if the Ukrainians have turned an apartment block into a fortified zone, they pull back and they drop a 1,500-pound bomb on it and drop the whole building, killing everybody inside. They're doing that over and over again. The Ukrainians used to be able to assemble troops about 15 kilometers behind the front line, concentrate them before sending them in to fight as a coherent force. Now, as they assemble them, the Russians are detecting it, and they're dropping the 1,500-pound bomb right on those troops, killing everybody. The Ukrainians can't concentrate their forces. Their artillery is being destroyed piecemeal by drones that are operating freely without any interference. And the Ukrainians are running out of artillery ammunition, so they can't even defend their troops in the trenches. And trench warfare is hell, excuse my language. It is a living hell. This war, I mean, war is, again, Tecumseh Sherman said it, war is hell. I forget, there was another general that said, thank goodness the war is so bad as it is because we grow to love it. Yeah, maybe Ulysses Grant said that, but this is all true. We know this, but this is a special kind of hell. This is Dante's Inferno 20 times over for the Ukrainian soldiers. And to be blunt, we're to blame. The American people are to blame because we have allowed our government to create this situation. This war is happening because of American policies, only because of American policies. And we have poured so much money and so much material into this war. We've kept it going longer than it naturally should have. This war should have been over a long time ago. Ukraine was never going to win this war. Russia was always going to win this war. What we've done is prolonged this conflict, ensuring that hundreds of thousands of more Ukrainians die, tens of millions of Ukrainians are displaced, homes are destroyed, cities are destroyed, towns are destroyed. And all the while, we're balancing on the precipice of a nuclear conflict that could put us at risk as well. But McGregor is 100% correct. This is a humanitarian disaster, and the best thing we could do is bring an end to it. And the easiest way to end this war is to cut off the supplies to Ukraine and force them to go to the negotiating table. They're on life support right now, and all we're doing is pumping artificially, stimulated life to a body that shouldn't be alive. We need to unplug it, get it done, and let Ukraine move on and try and recover as much as they can.